The metal bars of the cage were cold against Zarnok's skin. He pressed his body against the corner, trying to make himself as small as possible. The alien prison was huge, a dark place filled with cages just like his, each one holding someone lost, forgotten, or broken. The air smelled of rust, fear, and smoke. Every now and then, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the hall. The guards were cruel, and Zarnok had learned long ago not to attract attention. He had been a slave for what felt like centuries. Days and nights had no meaning anymore. Every morning he woke to the sound of the chains clanging. Every night he slept on the cold metal floor, dreaming of a life he could never have. His voice had been taken from him, cut off by the overlords so he could not cry for help or speak his thoughts. They wanted him silent, obedient, and broken. Zarnok's green eyes flicked toward the shadows. He saw the other slaves moving robotically, doing tasks assigned by the guards. Some had already lost their minds, muttering to themselves in the dark. Others simply stared, empty and hollow. Zarnok clenched his fists. He would not let his mind be stolen completely. He refused. Suddenly, a sharp metallic clang echoed nearby. A young guard had dropped something, and immediately another guard screamed. The noise sent a wave of fear through the prisoners. Zarnok ducked instinctively, his heart hammering. He hated the guards, but he hated the fear even more. He had learned to survive by being invisible, by staying quiet, by moving when no one was watching. He remembered the world before, a world of sunlight, laughter, and freedom. A world where he could speak, smile, and dream. Now it was all gone. All he had was this cage. All he had were memories that hurt more than the chains. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden movement outside the cage. A human. Zarnok's heart stopped. For a moment. Humans were rare here, almost unheard of. Most of the prisoners had never seen one. They were creatures of stories and legends, said to be reckless, strong, and kind. Sometimes. But why would a human be here? Was it a trap? Was this one sent by the overlords to punish the prisoners further? The human stepped closer, his boots silent, almost graceful, despite the heavy armor. He stopped in front of Zarnok's cage. The alien prisoner froze. He could see the curiosity in the human's eyes mixed with caution. The human looked around, scanning the cages, the halls, and the guards before focusing entirely on him. Zarnok wanted to look away, to hide, but something in the human's gaze made him stay. There was no anger, no cruelty, just interest. A small spark of hope flickered inside Zarnok's chest, and he quickly tried to smother it. Hope was dangerous. It made the chains feel heavier, the cage feel smaller, and the nights feel colder when it disappeared. The human crouched slightly, holding something in his hands. It was small and metallic, shining faintly under the dim light. Zarnok could not see clearly, but he felt the tension in the air. The guards were still nearby, moving in their usual robotic patterns, unaware of the stranger. Time seemed to stretch. The human's eyes never left him. For the first time in centuries, Zarnok felt seen. He did not know why or how, but a feeling he had almost forgotten began to grow inside him. It was strange and frightening, but also comforting. Then a loud crash echoed from the far end of the hall. A stack of crates had fallen, drawing the attention of the guards. Zarnok and the human froze. The guards shouted orders and ran toward the noise. In that moment, the human's gaze flicked back to him, and Zarnok noticed a tiny, almost invisible gesture, a nod, a promise. Zarnok's breath quickened. He did not understand and what the human was planning, but for the first time in a long time, he imagined a world beyond the cage, a world where he could move freely, speak freely, and feel freely. His tail twitched with nervous excitement. The sound of approaching guards returned him to reality. The human stood, ready to leave, but paused once more to look at him. Something unspoken passed between them, a silent message that stirred something deep inside Zarnok. Perhaps he was not entirely forgotten. As the guards returned, Zarnok sank back against the cold bars, his mind racing. Who was this human? Why was he here? And most importantly, could he really be the key to freedom, or was it just another trick of fate, a cruel joke meant to break him further? The metal bars were still cold, the chains still tight, and the hall still dark. But now, in the corner of the cage, a small ember of hope glimmered, and for the first time in a long time, Zarnok wondered if he might survive another day. The cage was quiet now, but Zarnok's mind was anything but. He pressed his palms against the cold metal bars, tracing the scratches and dents from long-forgotten struggles. Time here had no meaning. Minutes and hours blurred together. The only rhythm was the clanging of chains, the footsteps of guards, and the muffled cries of those trapped beside him. He could feel the emptiness inside him growing, like a shadow that stretched farther each day. Even the small ember of hope he had felt when he saw the human yesterday seemed distant now, buried under the weight of despair. Zarnok had learned long ago that hope could be dangerous. It made the pain sharper when it was taken away. His green eyes wandered to the other prisoners. Many had stopped moving altogether. Their eyes were blank, staring into nothing. Some whispered to themselves in broken alien words, and others simply slumped against the walls of their cages. Zarnok had resisted that fate for as long as he could, but each day it became harder to fight. He remembered the world before the cages, before the chains. His family, the sunlight that warmed his skin, the forests that smelled of life. He remembered laughter, the kind that made your chest ache with happiness, and music that moved him to tears. Those memories were both beautiful and cruel. They reminded him of what he had lost. A sudden jolt of sound made him flinch. A guard slammed a metal tray onto the floor, spilling food that was cold and tasteless. The prisoners scrambled for scraps, their movements desperate. Zarnok ignored it. He had learned to survive on scraps, but now he no longer even felt hunger. His body moved, but his mind wandered in distant, empty corridors of memory and regret. For hours he sat in silence, thinking of nothing and everything at the same time. Then, as always, the memories returned, uninvited. He remembered his childhood, the fields where he ran under alien suns, chasing glowing insects with his friends. He remembered his mother's gentle hands and his father's quiet strength. And then he remembered the invasion, the ships in the sky, the fire, the screams. Everything changed in a single night. His world had been destroyed, and he had been stolen, silenced, and caged. Zarnok's hands trembled as he touched his face. The scars on his body were not just wounds, they were reminders of everything he had lost. The overlords had taken more than his freedom. They had tried to take his soul. Yet, somehow, a part of him remained untouched, a part that refused to break completely. As the night deepened, he noticed something strange, a small light flickering in the distance. It was faint, almost invisible, but it was there. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be the human, or was it just another illusion, a cruel trick played by his mind to make him suffer further? He watched the light, his curiosity battling with fear. For a moment he allowed himself to imagine freedom, imagine standing on a sky filled with stars, feeling wind on his face. Imagine walking away from the cages, away from the pain, away from everything that had held him captive for so long. The thought was intoxicating, yet terrifying. Hope had always led to disappointment, and Zarnok knew the danger. Suddenly, a whisper reached him from the next cage. Another prisoner, older and weaker, muttered in a trembling voice, "It will never end. We are forgotten." Zarnok swallowed hard. He wanted to respond, to say something to keep the man's spirit alive, but he had no voice. Silence was his prison as much as the metal bars. Hours passed like this, slow and heavy. Zarnok's mind wandered again, imagining what it would be like to escape. He thought of doors, keys, hidden passages, and guards asleep in their posts. He imagined taking down the overlords, freeing the others, and running into the sunlight. Each vision faded before it could take shape, leaving him more hollow than before. Then, just as the thought of despair threatened to swallow him completely, the faint light returned. This time, it was closer. Zarnok's heart raced, a wild, unfamiliar feeling clawing its way into his chest. He had been careful, distant, and silent, but something about this human presence stirred a fragile curiosity. Could he trust the human? Could anyone truly care in this cruel world? Zarnok didn't know, and fear made him hesitate. Yet, deep inside, a spark refused to die. Maybe, just maybe, someone outside the cage could see him as more than a broken slave. Maybe someone could believe in him when he could no longer believe in himself. The night grew colder. Zarnok curled against the corner of the cage, trying to conserve the little warmth he had. He stared at the faint flicker of light, unsure whether it was real or another trick of his desperate mind. But for the first time in countless cycles of despair, he allowed himself one thought. Perhaps he was not entirely forgotten. A distant sound of boots echoed, and Zarnok's green eyes sharpened. Danger was always near, but the danger felt different. It was no longer just the overlords or the cages. This time, something new had entered his world, something that could change everything. And though he did not yet know how, he felt the first tremor of something he had not felt in a long time, the possibility of hope. The shadows moved quietly along the walls of the alien prison. Zarnok's green eyes were fixed on a faint glimmer in the distance, the same flickering light that had haunted his thoughts the night before. His heart beat faster. Could it really be happening? Could the human he had glimpsed yesterday return? A soft sound, almost like a whisper, echoed through the hall. Zarnok's claws scraped lightly against the cold metal bars as he strained to hear. The footsteps were different from the guards, lighter, more deliberate, careful. The guards' heavy boots often brought fear, but these steps, they carried curiosity and something else he could not name. The human appeared suddenly at the far end of the hall. He was tall, with strong shoulders and careful movements that betrayed experience. His armor reflected the dim light, but unlike the guards, his presence was calm, not threatening. He paused and glanced at each cage, scanning the prisoners with eyes that seemed to see more than just bodies behind bars. Then his gaze locked on Zarnok. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Zarnok felt a strange sensation twist inside him. It was not fear, though he had long forgotten the feeling of safety. It was curiosity. It was hope. The human crouched slightly, lowering his weight to appear less intimidating. He extended one hand slowly, almost like an invitation. Zarnok froze. He did not know if he should trust this human. He had learned that trust was a dangerous thing. Trust could get you beaten, silenced, or killed. Yet something in the human's eyes told him that this was different. There was no cruelty, no deception, only interest and perhaps care. The human whispered something, words in a language Zarnok did not fully understand, yet the tone was gentle, almost soothing. He repeated the words, pointing at Zarnok's chains. "I can help, if you trust me," he said, voice low but firm. Zarnok hesitated. The chains were heavy, biting into his skin. The cage had been his prison for so long that he could barely imagine freedom. He had tried to dream of it, yes, but dreaming was safer than believing. Believing was dangerous. Still, the human did not move away. He did not demand or threaten. He simply waited. A guard's voice suddenly boomed down the hall. The human froze, then ducked behind a shadowed corner, pulling Zarnok's gaze toward him. Zarnok realized that the human was willing to risk danger for him. That simple realization made his chest tighten. No one had ever risked themselves for him before. No one had ever looked at him like he mattered. The human moved again, this time closer, and pulled a small tool from his pack. It was thin, metallic, and gleamed faintly in the dim light. Zarnok did not understand its purpose, but he understood the intention. Freedom. Zarnok's tail twitched nervously. Could he trust this stranger? He had survived for so long by keeping silent, by being invisible. What if this was a trap? What if his chains grew tighter and the punishments harsher? Fear coiled in his chest, but beneath it, a spark of something long buried flickered. Curiosity, hope. The human crouched near the cage, carefully examining the lock. "Almost there," he whispered to himself. Zarnok's mind raced. Every nerve in his body screamed caution, but another part, a deeper part, whispered that this might be his chance, that maybe, just maybe, freedom was possible. Then the human looked up. His eyes met Zarnok's, and there was a silent question in them. "Do you trust me?" Zarnok's jaw tightened. He could not speak, but he could nod, or refuse. The human's hand hovered over the lock, waiting for the answer. Zarnok's claws grazed the bars. A decision had to be made. He had lived for centuries in silence and despair, but he could not ignore the possibility of something better. Slowly, carefully, he nodded. The human smiled, almost imperceptibly, and began working on the lock with steady hands. Zarnok's eyes darted around the hall, alert for any sign of danger. He felt his heart pounding, a mix of fear and excitement. He was on the edge of something he had almost forgotten existed. Hope. The lock clicked. Metal bars groaned as the human gently lifted them. For the first time in what felt like forever, Zarnok stepped out of the cage. His legs shook, but he did not fall. The air felt different outside the bars. Cleaner, freer. The faint scent of metal and dust mixed with something else, possibility. The human gestured for Zarnok to follow. Every step was tense. The guards could return at any moment. Zarnok's body was ready to run, fight, or hide, but the human's presence gave him a strange calm. They moved through the hall carefully, silently, shadows among shadows. Suddenly, a guard turned a corner. The human froze and whispered urgently, "Stay still!" Zarnok pressed himself against the wall, holding his breath. The guard passed without noticing them. Zarnok's heart raced, but the human's hand brushed lightly against his shoulder, a silent reassurance. They continued moving through the prison, each step bringing Zarnok closer to a world he had only dared to imagine. His mind was full of questions. Who was this human? Why was he risking everything for him? Could he truly be free? For now, there was no time to answer. Danger lurked around every corner. All that mattered was the path forward, the tiny thread of hope that had appeared in the darkness of centuries. And for the first time, Zarnok allowed himself to imagine, Maybe this human could be his key to everything he had lost. The corridor stretched ahead, dark and silent, except for the soft footfalls of the human and the careful shuffle of Zarnok's claws against the cold floor. Every shadow seemed alive, every echo a potential threat. The alien prison was vast, filled with hidden eyes and danger lurking behind every corner. Yet, for the first time, Zarnok felt a strange courage stirring within him. The human glanced back, giving a small nod. "Stay close. One wrong step and we're done," he whispered. Zarnok nodded, though the weight of his chains, now loosened, still made each movement feel strange. He had been a prisoner for so long that freedom itself was almost foreign. They moved carefully past rows of cages, each holding creatures broken by time and cruelty. Some of the prisoners stirred as they passed, curious or desperate, but none dared speak. Zarnok noticed their eyes, hollow and resigned, and it made his chest tighten. He was stepping into danger, yes, but he also carried a responsibility he had never imagined, the possibility to survive, and maybe even help others survive someday. A sharp sound made them freeze. A guard was approaching, boots heavy and echoing loudly against the metal floor. The human crouched behind a shadowed corner, pulling Zarnok down beside him. The guard's flashlight swept across the corridor. Zarnok held his breath, every muscle tense. The beam of light passed inches from them. Zarnok's heart pounded and sweat dripped down his forehead. Once the guard was gone, the human exhaled quietly. "Too close," he muttered. "We need to move faster but carefully. There's a patrol up ahead." Zarnok's tail twitched nervously. He had never moved like this before, never relied on someone else for survival. Yet the human's calmness, his focus, inspired a strange confidence. They were a team now, whether Zarnok wanted to admit it or not. The next corridor was wider, with a faint glow of red lights overhead. The human motioned for Zarnok to follow silently. "We'll split if we have to," he whispered. "I'll create a dist. Raction, you go through the side passage." Zarnok's eyes widened. Split? Alone? Fear surged through him, but he clenched his fists. He could not run back to the cage now. He had to trust the human, even if it terrified him. The human moved forward, deliberately clanging a metal pipe against the floor, creating a loud echo. Instantly, two guards spun around, rushing toward the noise. Zarnok darted toward the side passage, his claws barely making a sound. His pulse raced, adrenaline burning in his veins. Every instinct screamed to stop, but he kept moving. Freedom was closer now, just a step ahead. The side passage was narrow and dark. Zarnok's eyes adjusted quickly, taking in the faint outlines of pipes, vents, and shadows. He had no idea where it led, but he trusted the human had a plan. As he moved forward, he caught glimpses of his own reflection in the metal walls, green eyes wide with fear and determination. Suddenly, a low growl echoed from the shadows. Zarnok froze. Something else was here, something big, alien, and dangerous. His heart raced, but he forced himself to breathe slowly. The human's voice called from somewhere above. "Move! Don't stop!" Zarnok took a deep breath and ran. The creature lunged from the darkness, its claws scraping the floor. He dodged just in time, his body twisting in ways he hadn't thought possible after centuries of chains. The creature snarled, snapping its jaws inches from his tail. Zarnok's pulse pounded. Every nerve screamed danger, yet he felt alive in a way he hadn't for decades. He vaulted over a broken vent and slid into a smaller corridor, breath ragged. The human appeared at the far end, motioning him forward. Together they ran through twisting halls, past guards and shadows alike, moving faster than Zarnok had ever moved in his life. Finally, they reached a large metal door. The human pulled out the tool, the same E he had used to open Zarnok's cage. Sparks flew as the lock clicked open. Zarnok stepped through, and for the first time he felt the faint touch of air that was not recycled from the prison. It was cooler, fresher, carrying the scent of the outside world, or at least a place closer to freedom. They paused just beyond the door, catching their breath. Zarnok looked at the human, trying to form words he could not speak. Instead, he simply nodded, a silent gratitude passing between them. The human's eyes softened, but there was no time for relief. Danger was still close. A patrol approached, and the human grabbed a small device from his pack. A bright flash erupted, disorienting the guards. Zarnok had never seen anything like it. The guards screamed and stumbled, giving them the precious seconds to escape further into the labyrinth of the prison. Zarnok's legs burned, his lungs ached, but he kept moving. Every step away from the cage felt like reclaiming a part of himself that had been lost. The risk was enormous. They could die at any moment, caught and punished in ways worse than the chains ever had been. Yet for the first time, Zarnok did not feel entirely afraid. The human had shown him that there was a chance, a small, dangerous, almost impossible chance, to be free. They turned a corner, moving deeper into shadows, their breaths loud in the silence. Zarnok's mind raced with possibilities. Freedom was no longer a dream. It was a fragile, flickering reality he had to fight for. And in that moment, he realized something. Survival was no longer enough. He wanted more. He wanted life. The human glanced back at him, a silent question in his eyes. Are you ready for what comes next? Zarnok nodded, though his body shook with exhaustion. He was ready. Whatever danger lay ahead, he would face it. He had already risked everything by stepping out of the cage. Now, there was no turning back. The corridors of the alien prison twisted like a labyrinth, dark and endless. Zarnok's heart pounded with every step. The human moved ahead with calm, determination, but Zarnok could feel the tension in the air. Every shadow seemed alive, every echo a potential threat. They had come far, but the hardest part, the actual escape, was still ahead. The sound of boots approached from multiple directions. A patrol was on the move, and Zarnok knew they would not be as careless as before. The human whispered urgently, "We need to split. 2 paths, take your chance, I'll draw them away." Zarnok hesitated. Alone? After all he had been through, alone felt terrifying, but he saw the determination in the human's eyes. This was a risk they had to take. He nodded, swallowing fear like bitter medicine, and darted toward the left passage, shadows swallowing his figure. The corridor narrowed, forcing Zarnok to move sideways. Pipes hung from the ceiling and steam hissed from cracks in the walls. The air was thick, heavy, and hot, making every breath a struggle. Zarnok's claws scraped the metal floor as he ran, trying to move quietly while his pulse thundered in his ears. Then a guard appeared at the end of the passage. Zarnok froze, his mind racing. There was no time to think. The guard raised a weapon, and Zarnok's survival instincts took over. He dove to the side just as a blast of energy fired past his head. Sparks flew, lighting the corridor in brief flashes of danger. Zarnok rolled and scrambled behind a support beam, heart hammering. He could hear the guard shouting, calling for backup. Somewhere behind him, the human's voice yelled, "A distraction, a lure." Zarnok's chest tightened. Every step, every decision could mean life or death. The narrow passage opened into a larger chamber, filled with crates and machinery. Shadows danced on the walls from flickering lights. Zarnok's eyes adjusted quickly, spotting vents along the ceiling. Without thinking, he leapt onto a crate and climbed toward a vent. The metal was hot and slick, but his claws found grip. He pulled himself inside, the vent's darkness swallowing him. Inside, the air was tight and musty. He moved slowly, every inch a challenge, but the vent led toward what he hoped was freedom. Every sound outside made him freeze. Guards' boots, shouts, the occasional metallic clang. Zarnok felt the human's presence in spirit, trusting him to be alive and drawing the enemy away. Suddenly, a section of the vent shuddered violently. Zarnok froze. From below, he heard a growl, a monstrous creature patrolling the prison. Its claws scraped against metal, echoing through the narrow vent. Zarnok's breath caught. The creature was massive, faster than he could move. He pressed flat against the ceiling, silent as death, holding his breath as it passed beneath him. The shadows of its limbs stretched like dark fingers, threatening to crush him. When the creature finally moved away, Zarnok exhaled silently. His tail twitched nervously, but a thrill surged through him. Danger had always been a part of life in the prison, but this, the possibility of dying while reaching freedom, was different. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and alive. The vent opened into a maintenance hall, lit dimly by overhead lights. Zarnok dropped carefully onto the floor, listening. The path to the exit was near, but heavily guarded. Energy barriers shimmered across the hall, pulsing with a deadly light. One wrong step, and it could fry him instantly. He noticed a control panel nearby. It was small and worn, but he could see buttons and a faint screen. His claws moved over it, pressing and tapping, trying to understand. Then a memory of the human's gestures returned, how he had shown patience, how he had solved problems calmly. Zarnok mimicked what he remembered. Sparks flashed, lights flickered, and the barriers hummed, then vanished. A small smile crept across Zarnok's face. For the first time, he felt the taste of victory. Freedom was close, almost within reach, but the sound of a shout behind him snapped him back to reality. A guard had spotted it. Zarnok ran, heart hammering, claws striking the metal floor. He could see the exit doors ahead, heavy and reinforced. The human had opened a path for him, risked his life, and now Zarnok had to finish it. He reached the doors and tried the handles. Locked. He cursed under his breath. Freedom was never simple. The human appeared beside him, out of nowhere, moving like a shadow. "Here," he whispered, pressing a small device against the door. Sparks flew, locks clicked, and the door slowly creaked open. Zarnox stared, disbelief and relief mixing in his chest. They had made it this far. But danger was not gone. Guards were shouting, moving fast, alarms blaring. Zarnox's legs burned, his lungs ached, but he ran through the doors, the corridor opening to an unknown space beyond. His eyes adjusted to faint light, the first real light he had seen in centuries. The taste of the air was different, sweeter, freer. The human followed, pulling Zarnox along. "Keep moving, almost there." They ran through twisting alleys and open halls, dodging guards and patrols. Every step was a test, every moment a gamble. Zarnox felt alive in ways he had forgotten. Fear and hope intertwined in a tight, electrifying knot. Finally, they reached a reinforced gate leading to the outside. Beyond it, Zarnox could glimpse a faint sky, streaked with alien suns. Freedom was there, almost tangible, but the sound of pursuit was close, relentless. Zarnox's claws dug into the ground, ready for the final leap. The human looked at him and nodded. "Together," he said. Zarnox took a deep breath. Danger was everywhere, but for the first time he did not run from it. He ran toward life, toward freedom, toward hope. The sky was a dark swirl of alien clouds tinged with strange light. Zarnox ran alongside the human, every step fueled by desperation and hope. The open air felt like a dream after centuries of cold metal, dark corridors, and suffocating cages. Yet freedom was not yet theirs. The prison guards were relentless, closing in with alarms screaming like angry beasts. Zarnox glanced at the human. His face was grim, sweat streaked across his forehead, and his eyes burned with determination. The human had been calm through everything, but now Zarnox could see the strain. Every breath he took seemed heavier, every movement calculated. He was risking everything for Zarnox, and the realization hit him with a shock. The human might not survive this escape. Suddenly, a wall of energy erupted ahead. Guards had activated a barrier, cutting off the path to the exit. Zarnox skidded to a halt, claws scraping metal, heart pounding. Behind them, shouts and blaster fire echoed, growing closer. Panic surged in him. They were trapped. The human turned, scanning the situation. "You'll have to go around," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "I'll hold them off." Zarnox froze. "No!" He wanted to shout, but no words came. He had relied on the human for so long, trusted him, followed him, and now the human was ready to sacrifice himself. Fear and guilt burned in Zarnox's chest. He had never imagined someone would risk everything for him. The human grabbed a device from his pack, tossing it to Zarnox. "This will open a side gate. Run when I signal. Don't wait for me." Zarnox's claws shook as he took it. His mind raced, but he realized he had no choice. Trusting the human was the only way forward. The human crouched, raising his weapon and firing with precision, drawing the guard's attention. Blaster bolts whistled past Zarnox, sparks lighting the corridor. "Go!" the human shouted, and Zarnox didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the side gate, heart hammering. Behind him, he could hear the chaos, the shouts, the clashing metal, the desperate struggle. He wanted to look back, to help, but he knew he couldn't. The device in his hands beeped. He pressed the button, and the gate slid open with a hiss. Freedom lay beyond, a narrow path leading toward the outer cliffs of the alien fortress. Zarnox's green eyes widened as he glimpsed the open sky, alien suns spilling pale light across jagged rocks. The air smelled sweet and warm, unlike the prison's stale metal. He paused for only a moment, taking a breath, before running through the gate. Behind him, the human continued to fight, taking down guards with skill and courage that made Zarnox's chest ache. He could see blaster bolts striking near him, see the human's movements precise, yet dangerous. Every second was a gamble. Zarnox's thoughts swirled with conflicting emotions. Fear, relief, gratitude, and guilt clashed in him. He had survived centuries of silence and chains, and now someone, this human, was giving everything for him. He realized something profound. He had never felt truly alive until now. The fear, the struggle, the hope, it all burned through him like fire. The cliffs ahead were jagged and steep, but Zarnox didn't stop. Every step was closer to freedom, closer to life beyond the prison. Yet, he couldn't shake the image of the human fighting alone. He clenched his fists, wishing he could turn back, do more, say something, but words were useless. Then, a blinding flash lit the corridor behind him. Zarnox's stomach dropped. The human had triggered a final trap, a controlled explosion designed to hold the guards at bay. The sound was deafening, shaking the ground beneath Zarnox's feet. Dust and debris filled the air and Zarnox stumbled, coughing, heart in his throat. When the dust cleared, Zarnox forced himself to move. He reached the edge of the cliff, looking back toward the prison. Flames flickered in the distance, smoke rising high. He could no longer see the human, but he knew the human had survived this far, taking the risk to ensure Zarnok could escape. Zarnok collapsed to his knees, breathing hard. For the first time in centuries, tears filled his eyes, not just for the suffering he had endured, but for the selfless courage of the human. He realized that hope could exist even in the darkest places, that even a broken slave could be given a chance to live fully because someone believed in him. The sun, or what passed for a sun in this alien world, touched his skin, warm and unfamiliar. Zarnok stood slowly, his body aching, but his spirit renewed. He had been given everything, a chance, a companion, a purpose. And he vowed silently, with every fiber of his being, that he would not waste it. Somewhere behind the smoke and chaos, the human's actions had bought time, not just for Zarnok, but for countless others trapped in the prison. The sacrifice was immense, yet it left a mark on Zarnok that he would carry forever. Courage, loyalty, and hope were no longer abstract words. They were alive in him, flowing through his veins like electricity. Zarnok turned toward the horizon, toward the jagged cliffs and distant light. The journey was far from over, but he would face it. Freedom was more than a physical escape. It was a chance to reclaim life, to honor those who had fought for it, and to finally be more than a silent, forgotten slave. He closed his eyes, feeling the wind whip across his face, smelling the fresh air of a world that was not his prison. And deep in his chest, he carried one truth. Someone had given everything for him. And now, Zarnok would give everything to survive, to live, and to fight for the hope that had been handed to him. The wind swept across the cliffs, carrying the scent of alien forests and the distant ocean. Zarnok stood at the edge, gazing at the horizon where the twin suns were beginning to rise. Light spilled across jagged rocks, painting the world in colors he had almost forgotten existed. For centuries, he had known only darkness, cold metal, and the endless echo of chains. Now, freedom stretched out before him, vast and alive. Yet the taste of victory was bittersweet. The memory of the human sacrifice weighed heavily on him. He could no longer be the figure who had risked everything so he could run, breathe, and survive. But Zarnok felt the human's presence in every step he took, in every breath of wind, and in the quiet rhythm of his heart. He had been given a gift, and he would honor it. Zarnok's claws scraped against the cliff's edge as he began to move down the slope, careful but purposeful. The terrain was treacherous, but every step felt like reclaiming a piece of himself. He remembered the cold floors of the prison, the endless nights in darkness, and the suffocating chains, and he smiled faintly. The world had not crushed him completely. He had survived. The alien landscape stretched before him, wild and untamed. Strange plants with glowing leaves swayed in the morning light. Birds, or bird-like creatures, sang in voices that were both melodic and strange. Zarnok's senses, dulled by centuries of confinement, began to awaken. He inhaled deeply, tasting freedom in every breath. It was sharp, intoxicating, and terrifying. He paused near a small stream, watching the water ripple over smooth stones. The reflection in the water startled him. His green eyes, once hollow and tired, now gleamed with life and determination. The scars on his body remained, but they no longer defined him. They were reminders of survival, of resilience, and of the price someone had paid to give him this chance. Zarnok crouched beside the stream, letting the water run over his hands. He closed his eyes, thinking of the human, the one who had trusted him, fought for him, and risked everything so that he could live. Gratitude filled him, heavy and warm. He had never imagined anyone could see worth in a silent, broken slave, and yet here he was, alive, because someone had believed in him. For a moment, Zarnok allowed himself to imagine the future. A world beyond this prison, beyond the alien overlords, where he could speak, run, and breathe freely. He imagined helping others who were trapped, using the skills he had learned in captivity to fight for life, freedom, and hope. The thought made his chest tighten, not with fear, but with purpose. He was no longer just surviving, he was beginning to live. A sound made him snap his head up. In the distance, a small spacecraft hovered silently among the cliffs. It looked battered, but functional. Zarnok's heart leapt. Perhaps it was a scout ship from the humans' people, or a vessel left behind by explorers. He did not know. All he knew was that it represented another chance, another step into a life beyond chains. Zarnok ran toward the ship, claws striking the ground with energy he hadn't felt in decades. Each step was light, swift, and confident. The wind whipped through his hair, carrying away the last remnants of fear and despair. The world seemed to open for him, vast and full of possibilities. He reached the ship and paused, glancing back one last time at the cliffs. Somewhere in the prison, the human's courage had turned the tide, given him this moment, and perhaps inspired others to rise. Zarnok clenched his fists, a silent vow forming in his mind. He would survive, he would fight, he would carry the story of this sacrifice, this hope, and this freedom wherever he went. The ship hummed to life, and Zarnok stepped inside. The interior was simple, yet welcoming. Controls blinked softly, lights casting a calm glow. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of centuries lift from his shoulders. For the first time, he was truly free, not just from chains, but from the shadows that had haunted him for so long. As the ship lifted from the cliffs, Zarnok looked out at the alien world below. Mountains, forests, and oceans stretched endlessly, painted in light and shadow. He felt small, yet powerful. The journey ahead was unknown, dangerous, and uncertain. But he was ready. He had been given everything to live, and he would not waste it. A single thought echoed in his mind, steady and bright. Hope is stronger than despair. Courage is stronger than fear. And even in the darkest places, someone can believe in you, enough to give you a chance at life. Zarnok sat back, letting the hum of the engines carry him forward. Freedom was no longer a dream. It was a path, wide and endless, stretching into the skies and beyond. And for the first time, Zarnok smiled fully, letting the warmth of hope fill him completely. Somewhere out there, the human had changed his life forever. And now, Zarnok would carry that gift, living not just for himself, but for the hope, courage, and freedom that had been handed to him. The stars above shimmered like distant promises, and Zarnok knew, deep in his heart, that his journey was only beginning.